You don't belong here. Get off my tarmac before I call the police." Those were the last words Captain Brad Sterling ever spoke as a commercial pilot. He looked at the woman standing in the rain, wearing a faded hoodie and muddy sneakers, and he saw a threat. He saw a trespasser. But if he had looked just a little closer, he would have seen the receipt for the $65 million Gulfstream G650ER looming behind him. He didn't know that the woman he was mocking wasn't just a passenger. She was the new owner of the entire aviation fleet. And by the time the engine started, his life was already over. This is the story of the flight that never took off and the karma that hit harder than a crash landing. The rain at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey didn't just fall. It felt like it was trying to erase the world. It was a cold, industrial grey Tuesday, the kind of day that made the luxury jets lined up at signature flight support look like stranded white whales. Dr. Vivienne Toussaint stepped out of the back of a Toyota Camry, her Uber, and pulled her hood up. The wind immediately whipped the fabric against her cheek. She didn't look like a woman who had just closed the biggest biotech merger of the decade. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in 48 hours, which was exactly the truth. She was wearing a vintage university hoodie that had seen better days, a pair of loose grey sweatpants and running shoes that were currently soaking up the puddles on the asphalt. Her hair was pulled back in a messy, practical bun, and her face was bare of makeup. To the casual observer, she looked like a student running late for a lecture, or perhaps someone working the late shift at the airport cafeteria. Vivienne thanked the Uber driver Arthur, a nice older man, who had told her all about his grandchildren during the ride from Manhattan. "You sure you're okay here, miss?" Arthur asked, squinting through the rain at the chain-link fence and the imposing private terminal. "This seems fancy. You need me to wait?" "I'm fine, Arthur. Thank you." Vivienne said, her voice raspy from overuse. She tipped him $100 on the app as she closed the door, a small act of grace that Arthur wouldn't notice until he was halfway back to the city. She turned toward the tarmac gate. Today wasn't about luxury. It was about urgency. Her father had suffered a stroke in Atlanta 3 hours ago. The commercial flights were all grounded or delayed due to the weather system moving up the East Coast. But the Gulfstream G650ER, tail number N7205T, could fly above the weather. She had bought the jet 6 days ago. It was so new to her portfolio that she hadn't even stepped foot inside it yet. She had acquired the asset through her holding company, Toussaint Ventures, as part of a larger acquisition of a boutique charter firm called Apex Aviation. She walked toward the FBO fixed-base operator side gate where the crew should be waiting. She flashed her digital ID at the security scanner. It beeped green. She pushed through the turnstile. 50 yards away, the beast sat waiting. The G650ER was a masterpiece of engineering, sleek and powerful, its engines capable of nearly Mach 1. Under the wing, doing a pre-flight walk-around, was a man in a crisp navy blue uniform. Captain Bradley Brad Sterling. Brad was a man who prided himself on aesthetics. He loved the lines of the jet, the gold stripes on his epaulets, and the exclusivity of his world. He had been flying private for 15 years, serving rock stars, senators, and oil tycoons. He knew what money looked like. Money looked like Rimowa luggage, Loro Piana, cashmere, and chauffeurs holding umbrellas. Money did not look like a black woman in a soggy hoodie walking alone across the restricted tarmac. Brad paused, his flashlight hovering over the landing gear. He squinted. The rain was blurring his vision, but he could see enough. He saw a figure approaching the plane. His plane. He checked his watch. His passenger, a V. Toussaint, was due in 10 minutes. The manifest listed the passenger as the principal of the holding company. Brad assumed V. Toussaint was some French-European old money aristocrat, probably a Victor or a Vincent. He looked back at the woman. She was getting closer. She was walking with a directness that annoyed him. "Hey!" Brad shouted over the sound of the wind. "Hey, you!" Vivian didn't stop. She just wanted to get out of the rain and into the cabin. She needed to call the hospital in Atlanta. She needed to know if her father was still awake. "I'm talking to you," Brad barked, stepping away from the landing gear and moving to intercept her. He stood 6'2", broad-shouldered, with the kind of jawline that usually got him out of speeding tickets. Vivian stopped 5 feet from him. She wiped rain from her eyes. "Good afternoon, Captain. I'm ready to board." Brad stared at her. He didn't blink. A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth, a look of incredulous amusement. "Board." Brad let out a short, sharp laugh. "You're ready to board what the bus to Newark is outside the fence, sweetheart." Vivian took a deep breath. She was too tired for this. "I'm referring to this aircraft, N720VT. I'm the passenger." Brad looked her up and down, making a show of inspecting her muddy sneakers. "You're the passenger." "Right. And I'm the King of England. Look, I don't know how you got past the gate, probably slipped in behind a catering truck, but you need to turn around. Now." "My name is Vivian Toussaint," she said, her voice hardening. "I am the owner of this aircraft. We have a slot time in 20 minutes. Open the stairs." Brad's face dropped the amusement. It was replaced by cold aggression. He took a step closer, invading her personal space. "Listen to me," he hissed. "I don't know what kind of scam you're running, or if you're some obsessed fan trying to stow away before the client gets here, but you picked the wrong pilot to mess with. I fly billionaires. I fly heads of state. I don't fly whatever this is." He gestured vaguely at her existence. "Now get off my tarmac before I have you arrested for trespassing in a secure federal zone." Vivian stood her ground. The wind howled around them, but she felt a strange, cold calm settling in her chest. It was the same calm she felt in the boardroom, right before she dismantled a hostile takeover. "Captain," she said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly quiet. "I am going to give you one chance to check your flight manifest. Look at the name. V. Toussaint. Then check my ID." She reached into her pocket. "Don't reach for anything," Brad shouted, his hand instinctually going to his belt, though he had no weapon. It was a power move designed to induce fear. "Hands where I can see them." "I'm reaching for my identification," Vivian said, slowly pulling out her wallet. She extracted her driver's license and held it out. The plastic was wet with rain. Brad didn't even look at it. He slapped her hand away. The sound was sharp, a distinct thwack that echoed even over the wind. The license flew out of her hand and skittered across the wet concrete landing, face down in a puddle of jet fuel and water. Vivian froze. She looked at her hand stinging from the impact. Then she looked at Brad. "You just assaulted me," she stated. It wasn't a question. "I neutralized a security threat," Brad sneered. "You refused to comply with a flight crew member's instructions. That's a federal offense. You want to keep pushing, I'll have the airport police here in 30 seconds. They love dragging people like you out of places you don't belong." Inside the cockpit of the Gulfstream, the co-pilot, first officer, Jessica Miller, was watching the scene unfold through the rain-slicked windshield. Jessica was 26, new to Apex Aviation, and terrified of Brad. He had spent the last 3 flights critiquing her landings and making inappropriate jokes about her dating life. She saw Brad slap the woman's hand. She saw the ID hit the ground. Something is wrong, Jessica thought. She grabbed the passenger manifest from the console. Passenger Dr. Vivienne Toussaint. Notes. Owner, Priority 1. Do not delay. Jessica squinted at the woman outside. It was hard to tell in the hoodie, but she carried herself with a certain posture. Jessica unbuckled her seatbelt. She had to do something. Outside, Brad was on a roll. He felt powerful. He was protecting the sanctity of his jet from the riffraff. "Pick it up," Vivienne said. Her eyes were locked on his. "Excuse me, my ID. Pick it up, clean it off, and apologize." Brad laughed, a loud barking sound. "You are delusional. You know what I'm done talking." He pulled out his radio. "Ops, this is Captain Sterling on 720 Victor Tango. I have a security breach at the aircraft. Requesting immediate law enforcement dispatch. Uncooperative female refusing to vacate the ramp." He smirked at her. "There. Now you're going to jail." Vivienne didn't move. She didn't flinch. She simply reached into her other pocket and pulled out her phone. It was wet, but the screen glowed bright. She dialed a number. "Calling your boyfriend to come pick you up," Brad taunted. "Tell him to bring bail money." "Speaker," Vivienne said, tapping the screen. The phone rang once, twice. "Ms. Toussaint," a male voice answered instantly. It was crisp, professional, and sounded very awake. "This is David from Apex Aviation Management. We have your flight plan filed. Is everything all right? You should be wheels up shortly." Brad froze. The blood drained from his face so fast it left him dizzy. He recognized that voice. That was David Halloway, the vice president of operations for the entire management company. Brad's boss's boss. Vivienne held the phone up her eyes, never leaving Brad's terrified face. "David," Vivienne said calmly, "I'm standing in front of my aircraft. I am unable to board." "What?" David's voice sharpened. "Is there a mechanical issue? The status shows green." "No mechanical issue," Vivienne said. "The issue is the pilot. Captain Sterling has refused me entry. He has slapped my identification out of my hand, and he has just called the police to have me arrested for trespassing." There was a silence on the line so profound it felt heavier than the storm. "He did what?" David whispered. "He is currently standing in front of me." Vivienne continued, watching Brad's mouth open and close like a fish out of water. "He seems to be under the impression that I am part of the cleaning crew, or perhaps a criminal because of my attire. I need you to clarify the situation for him. Immediately." "Put him on!" David roared. The sound was distorted by the speakerphone, but the rage was unmistakable. Vivienne extended the phone toward Brad. "It's for you." Brad's hands were shaking. He didn't want to take the phone. He looked at the woman, really looked at her, and suddenly the hoodie didn't look like poverty. It looked like indifference to wealth, the ultimate sign of power. He saw the way she stood. He saw the intelligence in her eyes. "Oh God," he thought. "Oh my God." He took the phone. "Mr. Halloway." "Sterling," David screamed. "You listen to me very carefully. The woman standing in front of you is Dr. Vivienne Toussaint. She owns the plane. She owns the contract. She owns us. If she is not in the air in 10 minutes, do not bother coming back to the office. Do you understand me? You get her on that plane, and you treat her like she is the Queen of England. Or so help me. God, I will personally ensure you never fly a paper airplane again." "I didn't know." Brad stammered, sweat mixing with the rain on his forehead. She didn't look. "Shut up!" David yelled. "Apologize and get her on board." The line went dead. Brad lowered the phone. He looked at the license lying in the puddle. He looked at Vivian. The power dynamic had shifted so violently, the air pressure seemed to drop. Brad started, his voice cracking. "Ms. Toussaint, I am so sorry. I honestly... With the hoodie and the license," Vivian said. She pointed to the ground. Brad swallowed his pride. It tasted like bile. Slowly, agonizingly, the captain dropped to one knee on the wet asphalt. He reached into the dirty puddle. The cold water soaked his uniform pants. He picked up the plastic card. He wiped it on his sleeve, leaving a streak of grease on his gold stripes. He stood up and held it out with two hands, head bowed. "I am incredibly sorry, ma'am," he whispered. Vivian took the ID. She didn't say thank you. "Lower the stairs, Captain. My father is dying. If I miss this slot because of your ego, you will wish you were in that puddle." Brad scrambled toward the fuselage like a frightened dog. He hit the button. The hydraulic whine of the stairs lowering was the only sound in the awkward silence. As the stairs touched the ground, the door opened. Jessica, the co-pilot, stood there. She looked from Brad's pale face to Vivian's stony expression. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Toussaint," Jessica said, stepping aside, her voice respectful and warm. "I have warm towels and coffee ready for you." Vivian looked at the young woman and softened slightly. "Thank you." She walked up the stairs, brushing past Brad without acknowledging his existence. Brad followed, closing the door, his heart hammering against his ribs. He thought he had saved it. He thought the apology was enough. He was wrong. The flight to Atlanta was 2 hours long. That was 2 hours for Vivian to sit in the silence of the cabin, staring at the back of his head and thinking about exactly what she was going to do when they landed. The karma hadn't hit yet. It was just winding up. The cabin of the Gulfstream G650ER was a sanctuary of beige leather and polished mahogany, usually a place of relaxation for the ultra-wealthy. But today, at 41,000 feet, the air inside was thick enough to choke on. Vivian sat in the principal seat, the one facing forward on the right side. She had discarded her wet hoodie, revealing a simple black t-shirt underneath. A warm blanket was draped over her legs, and a cup of black coffee sat untouched on the side ledge. She wasn't looking at the luxury around her. She was staring at the flight map on the monitor, watching the little airplane icon inch closer to Atlanta. Every minute felt like an hour. Her phone was in her hand, but there was no signal up here, and the Wi-Fi was spotty due to the heavy storm clouds below them. She was cut off. She didn't know if her father was still holding on. In the cockpit, the atmosphere was even worse. Captain Brad Sterling was flying the plane manually, his knuckles white on the yoke. He usually engaged the autopilot, by now leaning back to read a magazine or chat with the co-pilot. But he couldn't relax. He felt the weight of the woman in the back pressing against his neck. "Center Gulfstream, 720, Victor Tango, requesting direct routing to PDK," Brad said into the headset, his voice tight. "Unable direct Victor Tango, traffic saturation, maintain current heading," Air Traffic Control replied. Brad cursed under his breath. He needed this flight to be perfect. He needed to grease the landing so smoothly that she wouldn't even feel the wheels touch the ground. He needed to be the hero who got her to her dying father in record time. Maybe then she would forget the incident on the tarmac. Maybe she would see him as a professional who made a mistake, not a monster. Beside him, First Officer Jessica Miller was silent. She checked the gauges, monitored the fuel flow, and kept her eyes on the horizon. She had lost all respect for Brad in the last hour. She had seen the way he treated the line guys, the way he treated the fuelers, and now the way he had treated the owner. It was a pattern. He punched down. "She's quiet back there," Brad muttered, breaking the silence. He didn't look at Jessica. "She's worried about her father, Brad," Jessica replied coolly. "Yeah, I know." "I know," Brad said fast. "Look about what happened. I was just following protocol. You know how it is. Security is tight these days. You see someone in a hoodie walking on a hot ramp. You assume the worst. I was protecting the asset." Jessica turned her head slowly to look at him. "You slapped her hand, Brad. You made her kneel in a puddle." "I didn't make her kneel," Brad protested, his voice rising in a panic. "She dropped the ID. I didn't pick it up immediately. It was a misunderstanding, a bad one, sure. But I can fix this. I'll apologize again when we land. I'll carry her bags. I'll drive her to the hospital myself if I have to." Jessica looked back out the window. "I don't think this is something you can fix with a ride, Captain." The intercom chimed. Both pilots jumped. "Captain," came Vivian's voice. It was calm, devoid of emotion. Brad scrambled to press the talk button. "Yes, Ms. Toussaint. Anything you need, I can turn up the heat. Get you more coffee. How long until landing?" "We are making great time, ma'am. I've got the throttles pushed up. We should be on the ground in roughly 45 minutes. I'm going to get you there as fast as this bird can fly." 45 minutes, she repeated. "Thank you." The line clicked off. Brad let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "See, she's talking to me. It's civil. She just wants to get there. Once she sees her dad, emotions will take over. She'll forget about the little tiff at Teterboro." He was trying to convince himself. He was desperate to believe that his career wasn't currently in a nosedive. He thought about his mortgage in Connecticut, the lease on his Porsche, the private school tuition for his daughter. He needed this job. Apex Aviation paid 20% above industry standard. If he lost this, he was back to flying cargo in the middle of the night, or worse, instructing students in Cessnas for peanuts. "I just need a chance," he thought. Just one chance to explain. Back in the cabin, Vivian wasn't thinking about forgiveness. She was thinking about leverage. She opened her laptop. The onboard Wi-Fi finally connected. She logged into her secure cloud server. She pulled up the Apex Aviation acquisition documents. She wanted to know everything about the crew policies. She wanted to know the disciplinary procedures. She wanted to know exactly how much power she had. She found the clause she was looking for: immediate termination for conduct detrimental to the company's reputation or client safety. She read it twice. Then she opened a new email draft. To David Halloway, FP Operations, Subject Incident Report, Flight N 720VT. She began to type. She didn't embellish. She didn't use emotional language. She simply listed the facts. 1. Captain Sterling verbally abused the owner. 2. Captain Sterling physically struck the owner's hand. 3. Captain Sterling attempted to involve law enforcement based on racial profiling. She paused. Her fingers hovered over the keys. She looked out the window at the clouds, now tinged with the orange of the setting sun. She thought about the pilot's face when he realized who she was. The fear. Was it enough to fire him? Some might say he made an honest mistake. He was protecting the plane. Then she remembered the look in his eyes before he knew who she was. The sneer. The absolute certainty that she was beneath him. That wasn't a mistake. That was character. And men with that kind of character were dangerous in the sky. If he judged her that quickly, how would he judge a critical mechanical failure? How would he treat a junior co-pilot raising a safety concern? Arrogance in aviation killed people. She finished the email. Recommendation. Immediate review of Captain Sterling's employment status upon landing. She didn't hit send yet. She would wait until they were on the ground. She wanted to see how he handled the landing. She wanted to see if he was capable of humility without the threat of a boss on the phone. The plane began its descent. The engine spooled down, the hum changing pitch. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brad's voice came over the speaker, sounding overly cheerful. "We are beginning our descent into the Atlanta area. The weather is looking decent. A little rain, but nothing we can't handle. We'll have you on the ground in 20 minutes. Thank you for choosing Apex." Vivian closed her laptop. The final act of the flight was approaching. DeKalb Peachtree Airport, PDK, was the preferred airport for private aviation in Atlanta. It was closer to the city than the massive Hartsfield-Jackson, and usually much quieter. As the Gulf Stream broke through the cloud layer, the lights of Atlanta sprawled out below them like a grid of gold and amber. Vivian pressed her forehead against the cool glass. "Hold on, Dad," she whispered. The landing was fast. Brad came in hot, anxious to minimize the time. The wheels hit the runway with a firm thud, harder than usual, followed by aggressive braking. It wasn't dangerous, but it was desperate. He was driving the jet like a getaway car. They taxied quickly to the FBO. Before the engines had even fully spooled down, Vivian was out of her seat. She grabbed her bag. She didn't wait for the pilots to come open the door. She stood by the exit, hand on the handle, waiting for the pressure light to turn off. The moment the light died, she cranked the handle and pushed the door open. The stairs deployed automatically. The humid Georgia air hit her, smelling of pine and wet asphalt. A black SUV was already waiting on the ramp, its engine running. Brad burst out of the cockpit, hat in his hand, sweat staining his collar. He rushed to the door, nearly tripping over Jessica. "Miss Toussaint," he called out. "Miss Toussaint, please wait." Vivian was already halfway down the stairs. She didn't stop. Brad ran down the stairs after her. He caught up to her just as she reached the SUV. The driver, a large man in a suit, opened the back door for her. "Miss Toussaint," Brad panted, standing between her and the car door. He looked pathetic now, stripped of his cockpit armor. "Please, I need to apologize properly. I have a family. I was stressed. The weather. The security alerts. I made a terrible judgment call. Please don't file a report. We can work this out." Vivian paused. She looked at him. The rain had stopped here, but the ground was still wet. "You have a family, Captain Sterling?" she asked softly. Yes, I do. A daughter. She's 12. He seized on the opening, his eyes wide with hope. "And if your daughter walked onto a tarmac in a hoodie?" Vivian said, her voice like ice, and a grown man slapped her hand and threatened to have her arrested because he didn't like the way she looked. What would you want the owner of that airline to do? Brad opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The hypothetical struck him like a physical blow. He realized in that moment that she wasn't just a rich woman he had offended. She was a moral force he had violated. He croaked. "Get out of my way," Vivian said. She stepped around him and slid into the SUV. The door slammed shut with a heavy final sound. Brad stood there on the ramp, watching the black car speed away towards the gate. He was left alone in the exhaust fumes, the smell of burnt jet fuel stinging his nose. Jessica walked down the stairs slowly. She had her flight bag over her shoulder. She stopped next to Brad. "Did she fire you?" Jessica asked quietly. "She didn't say anything," Brad whispered. "She just left." "Maybe you got lucky," Jessica said, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it. "Maybe she has bigger things to worry about." Brad wiped his forehead. Yeah, maybe. Her dad is sick. She's distracted. If I just lay low, if I just fly the plane back to base perfectly, maybe it blows over." He looked at his phone. No missed calls, no emails. The silence gave him a sliver of hope. "Come on," Brad said, straightening his tie, trying to regain some semblance of authority. "Let's secure the aircraft. We have to reposition to Teterboro in the morning. I want this bird spotless." He walked back up the stairs, forcing a strut into his step. He was Captain Brad Sterling. He had survived engine failures, bird strikes, and thunderstorms. He could survive one angry woman. But what Brad didn't know was that the silence on his phone wasn't a sign of safety. It was the calm before the execution. While Brad was putting the engine covers on the black SUV, was weaving through Atlanta traffic. Inside, Vivian was on the phone with the hospital. "He's stable," the nurse said. "He's asking for you." Vivian let out a sob of relief. "I'm 10 minutes away." She hung up. Then she opened her laptop again. The email draft to David Halloway was still there. She read it one last time. She thought about Brad's daughter. She thought about Mercy. Then she thought about the next person Brad would encounter, the next student, the next minority passenger, the next person who didn't look the part. Mercy for the wolf was death for the sheep. She hit send. The hospital, St. Joseph's Hospital, was a maze of sterile, white corridors. Vivian ran through them, ignoring the looks from nurses who saw her disheveled hair and sweatpants. She reached the cardiac ICU. Room 402. She pushed the door open. Her father, Marcus Toussaint, lay in the bed. He looked smaller than she remembered. Wires and tubes connected him to machines that beeped in a rhythmic, comforting cadence. But his eyes were open. "Vivi," he wheezed, a weak smile forming on his lips. "Papa." She rushed to the bedside, grabbing his hand. It was warm. "I'm here. I made it." "I knew you would," he whispered. You look like you ran all the way from New York." Vivian laughed, a tear tracking through the grime on her cheek. "I flew, but it felt like running." They sat together for hours. She told him about the merger. She told him about the new house she wanted to buy him. She didn't tell him about the pilot. Not yet. This moment was for love, not retribution. Around midnight, Marcus fell asleep. Vivian sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair, watching his chest rise and fall. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her exhausted. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. It was David Halloway. She hesitated, then answered. "David." "Vivian." David's voice was grave. "I received your email. I am beyond mortified. I have already forwarded the report to HR and legal." "Good," she said softly, not wanting to wake her father. "There is more," David said. "I pulled the cockpit voice recorder data remotely. We stream it for quality assurance on the new G650 address. I listened to the exchange on the ramp. The audio from the external mics picked it up." Vivian closed her eyes. "Then you know I didn't exaggerate." "Exaggerate?" David scoffed. "You underplayed it. The way he spoke to you, it's indefensible. But Vivian, there's something else you need to know. This isn't the first time." Vivian sat up straighter. "What do you mean?" I had my team do a deep dive into his personnel file while you were in the air. We found 3 sealed complaints from his previous employer. Similar incidents: disrespect to ground crew, aggressive behavior toward passengers he deemed difficult. He was let go quietly, and the records were sealed as part of a settlement. We didn't know. He's a repeat offender, Vivian said, her anger flaring up again. He is, David confirmed, and he's currently prepping the jet to fly back to New Jersey tomorrow morning. No, Vivian said. He is not flying my plane. Not ever again. I agree, David said. I'm flying down to Atlanta on the relief jet. I'll be there by 6 a.m. But we need to handle the termination face to face. It's a legal requirement for his contract type to avoid a wrongful termination suit. We need to do it by the book, so he can't sue us. You want me to be there? Vivian asked. You don't have to be, David said. I can handle it. Vivian looked at her sleeping father. She thought about the strength it took for him to raise her a black woman in a world that often tried to keep her down. He taught her to face bullies. He taught her that running away only emboldens them. No, Vivian said. I'll be there. I want to look him in the eye when you take his wings. Okay, David said. Meet me at the FBO at 7 a.m. We'll handle it before he steps on the plane. 7 a.m., Vivian repeated. Good night, David. She hung up. She leaned back in the chair. The drama was over. Now the justice began. The sun rose over Atlanta with a deceptive beauty. It was a crisp, golden morning at DeKalb Peachtree Airport. The storm had passed, leaving the sky a piercing, innocent blue. The tarmac steamed slightly as the morning light hit the damp concrete. At 6:15 a.m., Captain Brad Sterling was already at the plane. He looked impeccable. His uniform was freshly pressed. He had paid the hotel valet an exorbitant rush fee to have it dry cleaned overnight. His shoes were shined to a mirror finish. He had shaved closely, splashing on a scent of expensive sandalwood cologne. He felt good. In fact, he felt invincible. He had spent the night tossing and turning, replaying the events at Teterboro, but by morning his ego had rewritten the script. She was tired, he told himself, as he inspected the Gulf Stream's nose gear. She was emotional about her father. I was just doing my job. Security is paramount. Once she calms down, she'll realize she wants a pilot who is tough on security. Hell, she might even thank me. He believed it because he had to. Brad Sterling was a man who had constructed a reality where he was always the hero, never the villain. First Officer Jessica Miller arrived 10 minutes later. She looked exhausted. She hadn't slept well, knowing she had to get back into a cockpit with a man she now despised. She carried 2 coffees, a peace offering she didn't want to make. Morning, Jessica mumbled, handing him a cup. Morning, Jess, Brad chirped, taking the coffee. Beautiful day for flying, huh? Clear skies all the way back to Jersey. We'll be wheels up at 8 o'clock sharp. Jessica looked at him, bewildered by his cheerfulness. You're in a good mood. Why shouldn't I be? Brad took a sip, grimacing slightly. It wasn't the brand he liked, but he let it slide. We're flying a $65 million jet. We're getting paid. And hey, I figure the owner is probably glued to her dad's bedside. She won't be thinking about us. We just get the bird back to base, keep it shiny, and wait for the next call. Jessica unlocked the main cabin door. Brad, she was really angry. You didn't see her face when she got in the car. It wasn't just anger. It was resolve. Brad waved a hand dismissively. Rich people are always resolved about something until the next shiny object comes along. Trust me, kid. I've been in this game a long time. I know how to handle the elite. You just give them space, then you give them a smooth landing. They have short memories. He climbed the stairs, his confidence radiating off him like heat. He moved into the cockpit and began the pre-flight sequence. He flipped switches with practiced ease. Battery on. APU start. Check the MFDs. Did you file the flight plan? Brad asked, settling into the left seat, the captain's seat. Filed and approved, Jessica said, strapping into the right seat. IFR to Teterboro, FL 450. Good, Brad said. He adjusted his headset. Let's get the fuel truck over here. I want to top off. Don't want to make any stops. As they worked through the checklist, a sleek Cessna Citation X, one of the fastest business jets in the world, entered the airspace pattern. It was a beautiful aircraft, smaller than their Gulfstream, but aggressive and fast. Look at that Citation. Brad whistled, watching it flare over the runway. Coming in hot. Probably some tech CEO in a rush for a breakfast meeting. Jessica watched the plane taxi. It didn't go to the public parking area. It taxied straight toward the Apex Aviation hangar, pulling up just 50 yards away from their Gulfstream. That's weird. Jessica frowned. That's a charter jet. Why are they parking so close? Brad squinted. He saw the tail number. N100AX. His stomach gave a small involuntary lurch. A X. Apex Aviation. It's probably just a company plane, Brad said, his voice losing a fraction of its bravado. Maybe dropping off parts or a relief crew for another flight. He watched as the Citation's engines whined down. The door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a charcoal wool coat and a grim expression. He carried a briefcase, but no luggage. He walked with a purpose that made the ground crew scatter. Brad recognized him immediately. It was David Halloway, the VP of Operations, the man who had screamed at him on the phone yesterday. And walking right behind him, looking tired but terrifyingly composed, was Dr. Vivian Toussaint. She wasn't wearing a hoodie today. She was wearing a sharp black blazer, dark jeans and boots. She looked like she was walking into a boardroom to execute a hostile takeover. "Oh no," Jessica whispered. Brad griped the yoke. His knuckles turned white. "What are they doing here?" "I think," Jessica said, unbuckling her seatbelt, "they're here for you." "Stay in the seat," Brad ordered, panic rising in his throat. "We're prepping for departure. I'm the captain. I give the orders." "Brad," Jessica said it softly, "look at them. You're not the captain anymore." Outside, David and Vivian didn't head for the FBO building. They walked straight toward the stairs of the Gulfstream. Brad's hero reality shattered. He scrambled out of his seat. He needed to control the narrative. He needed to intercept them before they got on the plane. He smoothed his tie, put on his hat, his symbol of authority, and walked back through the cabin. He met them at the bottom of the stairs. "Mr. Halloway," Brad exclaimed, forcing a smile that looked more like a rictus of pain. "Mrs. Toussaint. What a surprise. We were just fueling up to bring the aircraft home. I didn't know you needed a lift back so soon. I can have the cabin ready in 5 minutes." David Halloway stopped 3 feet from Brad. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a hand to shake. He looked at Brad with the cold, clinical detachment of an undertaker. "Step away from the aircraft, Mr. Sterling," David said. Brad blinked. Excuse me. You are obstructing the crew entrance," David said. "Move." Brad stepped back, his boots splashing into a small puddle, a cruel echo of yesterday. David turned to Vivian. "Miss Toussaint, would you like to do this inside the FBO, or right here?" Vivian looked at the jet. Her jet. Then she looked at Brad. "Right here," she said. "I don't want to waste any more time than necessary." The wind blew across the tarmac, rustling the collar of Brad's coat. He looked between them, his smile faltering, then vanishing. "Is there a problem?" Brad asked, his voice trembling. "Yes, Brad," David said. "There is a massive problem, and you are standing in the middle of it." The noise of the airport seemed to fade away, leaving the three of them in a bubble of tension. David opened his briefcase. He didn't pull out a laptop. He pulled out a single thick envelope. "Brad Sterling." David began, his voice formal and loud enough for the nearby fuel truck driver to hear. "Effective immediately, your employment with Apex Aviation is terminated for cause." Brad felt like he had been punched in the gut. "Terminated? For what?" "Because of a misunderstanding." "I explained this. I was following security protocols. You can't fire me for doing my job." "We aren't firing you for doing your job," Vivian interjected. Her voice was calm, which made it all the more devastating. "We are firing you for how you did your job, and for who you are while doing it." "This is ridiculous!" Brad shouted, his face flushing red. "I'm a senior captain. I have thousands of hours. You're going to fire me because I hurt your feelings. This is a wrongful termination suit waiting to happen." "My union rep will have a field day with this." David laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You don't have a union rep, Brad. You're a contract employee. And as for wrongful termination..." David pulled a document from the envelope. "Do you recognize this?" He held up a sheet of paper. Brad squinted. It was a photocopy of a logbook entry from 3 years ago, from his time at Blue Sky Charters. Brad stammered. "This is a report regarding an incident in Miami," David read, "where you referred to a Hispanic passenger as the help and refused to let them board until they showed a bank statement. You were fired then too, but you signed a non-disclosure agreement to keep it quiet so you could get another job." Brad went pale. "That was sealed. You can't have that." "I have everything," David said. "When Ms. Toussaint reported your behavior yesterday, the aggression, the physical contact, the racial profiling, I called the CEO of Blue Sky. We went to flight school together. He told me everything." David took a step closer. "You have a pattern, Brad. You target people you think are weak. You target women. You target minorities. You use your uniform as a shield to be a bully." "Well, the shield is gone. I want a second chance," Brad pleaded, his arrogance evaporating into desperation. He looked at Vivian. "Ms. Toussaint, please. My daughter. Her school." Vivian looked him in the eye. "You brought up your daughter yesterday. I asked you a question then. I asked what you would want done if someone treated her the way you treated me." Brad looked down at his shoes. "You didn't answer," Vivian said. "So I will answer for you. You would want that man removed from power, immediately. You would want to ensure he never had the chance to humiliate another child." She pointed to his chest. "Give me your epaulets." Brad froze. "What?" "The stripes," Vivian said. "They belong to the company. You are no longer part of the company. Take them off." It was the ultimate humiliation for a pilot. The gold stripes on the shoulders were the symbol of rank, of achievement, of command. To remove them publicly was a court-martial without a trial. Brad's hands shook as he reached up to his shoulders. He unbuttoned the fabric loops. He slid the black and gold slides off. He held them in his hand, feeling their weight. "Give them to David," Vivian ordered. Brad handed the stripes to David, who dropped them into his pocket like trash. "And your ID," David added. "And your airport SID badge." Brad handed those over too. He was being stripped piece by piece. Without the badges, without the stripes, he was just a middle-aged man in a navy suit, standing on a runway where he wasn't allowed to be. "Now," David said, closing his briefcase. "Jessica." He shouted up to the cockpit. Jessica's head appeared in the window. She had opened the side window to listen. "Yes, Mr. Halloway, you are now pilot in command of this flight," David announced. "Do you have a second-in-command available?" "Yes, sir," Jessica said, her voice steady. "I can call Mark from the Atlanta pool. He lives 20 minutes away." "Call him," David said. "You're the captain now. Get this plane to Teterboro." Jessica looked down at Brad. Their eyes met. Brad looked for sympathy, for camaraderie. He found none. Jessica gave a sharp nod to David, then closed the window. She turned her back on Brad. Brad stood there, hollowed out. "So how do I get back?" David looked at him with mock confusion. "Get back?" "To New Jersey," Brad said. "My car is at Teterboro. My house keys—" "Well," David said, checking his watch, "you aren't flying on this jet. And you certainly aren't flying on my citation." "You're leaving me here?" Brad gaped. "You're a private citizen," Vivian said. "You can buy a ticket like everyone else. I hear Delta has a flight in 3 hours. Economy is cozy." She turned to David. "Thank you, David. I'm going back to the hospital. My father is waiting." "Take the car," David said. "I'll wait here for the crew change." Vivian looked at Brad one last time. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked at him with pity. "Mr. Sterling," she said. Brad looked up. "It costs nothing to be kind," she said. "I hope you learn that before you try to find another job. Because the aviation world is very, very small, and I have a very loud voice." She turned and walked back to the waiting SUV. Brad stood alone on the ramp. The wind picked up, cutting through his thin shirt, now that the adrenaline was gone. He watched the fuel truck pull up to his plane. No Jessica's plane. "Hey, buddy," a security guard in a yellow vest yelled from the gate about 50 yards away. "Where's your badge? You can't be out here without a badge." Brad turned. "I'm a pilot." "Not without a badge, you're not," the guard shouted, starting to walk toward him. "Escort required. You need to vacate the secure area." Brad looked at the Gulf Stream. He looked at the guard. He lowered his head. He began the long walk toward the public gate, his shoes scuffing against the concrete. He had arrived as a king of the sky. He was leaving as a trespasser. But the universe wasn't quite done with Brad Sterling yet. As he walked through the terminal to find a commercial flight, he realized the full extent of Vivian's warning. He pulled out his phone to book a ticket on a Delta flight. He opened the app. He tried to pay. Transaction declined. He frowned. He tried another card. Transaction declined. He called his bank, standing in the middle of the busy, noisy public terminal, surrounded by crying babies and tourists. "Yes, Mr. Sterling," the bank operator said. "We have put a temporary freeze on your accounts due to suspicious activity. It seems the corporate card you were using for your hotel stay was reported as unauthorized use by the employer." Brad closed his eyes. Apex had cut the card. He had put the dry cleaning on it. He was in Atlanta. He had no job. He had no active credit cards. And it was starting to rain again. 5 years had passed since the incident on the rainy tarmac at Teterboro. In the aviation world, the story of Captain Brad Sterling had become a cautionary legend known as the Toussaint check. Check your ego, or check your exit. Dr. Vivian Toussaint sat in the VIP lounge at JFK International. She was waiting for a commercial flight to London, reviewing applications for the Marcus Toussaint Aviation Scholarship on her iPad. Her father had passed away peacefully 2 years prior, and she had poured her grief into funding flight training for minority women. "Excuse me, ma'am." The voice was rough and hesitant. Vivian looked up. Standing near a cleaning cart was a man in a generic grey janitorial uniform. He was balding, stooped, and looked 10 years older than his actual age. He held a spray bottle and a rag like they were heavy weights. It took Vivian a moment to find the man beneath the weariness. "Brad," she whispered. Brad Sterling flinched, checking over his shoulder for a supervisor. "I wasn't sure if you'd recognize me," he said, staring at his worn shoes. "I just wanted to say hello." "It's been a long time," Vivian said, her voice neutral. She felt no anger, only a distant curiosity. "I assume you aren't flying anymore." Brad let out a short, bitter laugh. "No. After Apex fired me, David Halloway made sure my FAA file was flagged for safety violations. No reputable charter would hire me. I tried cargo, even bush flying in Alaska. The insurance companies wouldn't touch me. High risk, they said." He gripped the rag tighter. "My wife left when the savings ran out. My daughter is working 2 jobs just to get through state college because I couldn't help her. I lost everything." He looked up, his eyes wet with regret. "You were right, Ms. Toussaint. You said it costs nothing to be kind. But the price of not being kind, God, it costs everything." Vivian looked at this broken man. The arrogant captain who had slapped her hand was gone, replaced by a ghost haunting the terminal he used to rule. "I'm sorry for your struggles, Brad," she said sincerely, "but I'm glad you finally learned the lesson." "I did," he whispered. "I'm sorry. Truly." He started to turn away, ready to fade back into the background. "Wait," Vivian said. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card for her foundation. "My scholarship program needs a scheduler," she said, sliding the card across the table. "Someone to manage the flight simulator bookings for the students. It's an office job, no flying. But it pays better than scrubbing floors." Brad stared at the card, his hands shaking. "Why, after everything I did to you? Because redemption isn't for people who deserve it. It's for people who need it." Vivian said, her gaze steady. "And because I want those young students to learn from you." "Learn from me?" Brad asked, confused. "I'm a failure." "Exactly," Vivian replied. "You can teach them what happens when you think you're better than everyone else. You can be the living reminder that the most dangerous thing in the cockpit isn't the weather. It's the ego." She stood up to leave. "Call David on Monday. He won't like it, but he'll do what I say. Don't make me regret this." Brad picked up the card with 2 hands, treating it with more reverence than he had ever treated a flight yoke. "Thank you," he choked out. "Thank you." Vivian walked toward her gate, not looking back. She boarded her flight, leaving the past behind. And in the lounge, a former captain stood a little taller, finally understanding that a person's true altitude isn't measured in feet above the ground, but in the depth of their humanity. And that is how the turbulence finally settled. Captain Brad Sterling learned the hardest lesson of all. When you try to push someone down, you usually end up falling the furthest yourself. Vivienne Toussaint didn't just buy a plane that day. She bought a lesson in justice for everyone watching. It's a reminder to all of us. You never know who you're talking to. The person in the hoodie might be the owner of the company. The person serving your coffee might be fighting a battle you know nothing about. Respect isn't a tax you pay to the powerful. It's the currency of a decent society. What would you have done if you were Vivian? Would you have offered Brad that job at the end? Or would you have let him keep scrubbing floors? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of karma and redemption, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a story. We have a crazy one coming up next week about a gold digger who tries to scam a lottery winner only to realize he's an undercover FBI agent. You don't want to miss it. Thanks for watching. Fly safe, and remember, be kind. You never know when the karma flight is coming in for a landing.